Web3 is the internet of ownership. Web3 is the tokenized version of the internet. The biggest story of our lives still is China, US, AI, that kind of triumvirate, how that's all going to dance together.
Because
And
AI
and
is really what's going to allow Web3 and blockchain to really maximize its potential. Very similar to how mobile phones allowed the internet to really become maximized as well,
good,
right? So
good metaphor.
would you say that China is ahead of, let's say, US in that particular area in terms of leading the growth and innovation when it comes to AI? Who here has heard of Animoca Brands? Today we have a powerhouse guest with us. Anyone who's been in Web3 or in crypto will immediately recognize his name and the company he works with. Our guest, Rich Robinson, is the EIR, which stands for Entrepreneur in Residence at Animoca Brands, and we'll probably ask you to elaborate on that title, since that's a totally unique title that a lot of people have never probably heard in their lifetime. And in your 25 years as a leader in the tech space, he has seen it all when it comes to how each major technological revolution changed the way that we live, starting with the early days of the internet in the mid 90s, and then stretching to the mobile areas of the 2010s, and now with Web3 and crypto. Welcome to the Web3 Mission Possible podcast, Rich. How are you doing today?
Boomtown, give it up for Felix Cao, ladies and gentlemen. I don't care if you're driving. I don't care if you're in a bathroom stall, and it's kind of weird. Just I want everybody to clap. All right, awesome.
That is awesome. Wow, you look at that intro. You certainly know how to make an entrance. And, with your level of experience, this is going to be a banger of a podcast. And, what I found really fascinating is you're originally from Boston. And
Shitty of Boston, indeed, that bitter soil of New England.
and that's probably why the reason that you had moved to Asia and fell in love with Asia. So, I'm curious to know, and our audience as well, is over the last, 25 plus years that you spent in the tech space, a lot of that has been working in Asia. So, why did you choose Asia? And do you see that as an advantage to be working in Asia in the Web3 space?
Asia chose me. I did
Oh,
not have
interesting.
any connection at all to Asia
Hmm.
growing up. My Irish immigrant grandparents, close ties to Europe, from the Boston area. And I went to high school around like South Boston, Dorchester,
Hmm.
in that area in Boston, the dirty water uh, era of Boston. I would joke and say that the neighborhood where I went to high school, if during the 4th of July when there was fireworks, the kids would get scared and the parents would go, "Oh, don't worry, it's only guns," and they'd go, "Oh, okay," and they go back to sleep. But
Wow.
I
Big
took I
difference
took
between guns
that.
and fireworks, by the way.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I took that kind of Boston accent, drinking Cuddy Sock in the park with an Advac and Mackey Mac, out to California. I went to USC in Los Angeles
Hmm.
and got very much socialized. I think university is probably almost best used for socialization in a way, how to
100% agree.
interact with people from uh,
All
different
walks of
walks of
life.
life that you would never have met before, and kind of learning how to just take care of your hygiene and not overfeed or really destroy your body. And I think college is probably becoming less and less relevant these days, even though my oldest son has just started with University of Hawaii. But I still think it's a worthwhile exercise. But yeah, from there I got my Boston accent. Dude, beer, say beer again. And
Beer.
I got beer. I got
Beer.
that worked out of me. And they had an exchange program with Cambridge University. So I had all these ties to the UK and Ireland.
Hmm.
So I thought I'm going to go do an exchange program there in 88. And that's what roped me into China because, funnily enough, Boston, LA, all the way back to the UK, it was like Harry Potter for grown-ups before Harry Potter was even
Conceived.
conceptualized. And I loved it. I did the backpacking trip around Europe and I enjoyed the freedom of it and the variety of it and meeting new people. I always wanted my life to be like the bio on a dust cover of a novel of an author from the 1920s or 30s, Orwell or,
Hmm.
some other, author. um, back then who just kind of worked and traveled, jack of all trades, master of none. And I met this Aussie guy who had been working and traveling his way around the world for, at that time, 4.5 years. It blew my mind. He was totally broke, just worked and traveled, and also had done it all by land or sea because he was petrified of flying. And he
Oh, that's
put
very
something in my
interesting.
head, which was there's 4 trips in the world, mate. There's North, South America, there's
Hmm.
Europe to Asia, there's Africa and Australia. And you just do those 4 overland trips, you can hit hundreds of countries and territories, and you can see and feel and hear. But more importantly, mate, you can smell it. You can
Hmm.
smell the world. And I was like, I want to smell the world. I want to do that. So I made a deal with my parents and I said, I'm going to do that. I'm, working class, parents never went to college and I had lots of student loans. So I just started moving and work, travel. And I got a job as a bartender in the Virgin Islands. Then I was a ski bum in Switzerland. And this is all 1990s, early 90s.
So this is
Taught
like
English
right
in
before the
Prague.
internet era.
Indeed. The internet actually was technically already there. You could get like text-based CompuServe and AOL, but it was pre-World Wide Web, which
Right.
came out
Very
in,
primitive at that time.
90, 93, 94, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I just enjoyed laying the railroad tracks down in front of me as the train was chugging along, and just I'm going to go to Prague and be an English teacher after the revolution. And I read an article about fishing in Norway. You make a lot of money there. So I moved to a fishing village in Norway and go pick grapes in France. And I worked at the BMW factory in Germany and another ski season in Switzerland. And then I came here by train overland. So that's my connection to Asia. It's like, okay, I'm already in Europe. Let's take the storied Trans-Siberian, went Switzerland, Ukraine, Moscow, Siberia, Mongolia, Beijing to Hong Kong.
Wow, you
11
really
days on the
explored.
train over a 30-day period. That was 30 years ago. That was December of 93. It's my anniversary is coming up.
Wow,
And
exactly 30 years.
indeed, and the intention was let's experience this gradual change of landscape and architecture and people's facial features and culture and the language and the food. And I think overland travel is an underrated and wonderful way to go. But China was not on my radar, like really at all. In the 80s, when I was in high school and university, the Cold War raged.
Hmm.
Russia was going to destroy the world if Japan didn't take it over. And now all that is old is new again. Now Russia's going to destroy the world if China doesn't take it over. But uh, I didn't, 89 was a pivotal year. I graduated from college. Apartheid ends in South Africa. The wall falls in Berlin.
Hmm. A lot of historical
Scorpions write
events.
that song, yeah, the winds of change. But then China takes 3 steps backwards with Tiananmen Square. And
Hmm.
so I had low expectations of China. But I often say, as soon as I got across the border into Beijing on that train, the dragon just whatever dragons sounds make, Game of Thrones, just swooped down and dug her talons into me. And then the dragon and I had 2 kids. Now we're divorced, but we're still friends. But she's a Beijinger, and but I fell in love. I fell in love with China, and I feel that the biggest story of our lives still is China, U.S., AI. That kind of triumvirate, how that's all going to dance together. And I believe that engagement with China is super important.
Hmm.
And a lot of people right now are saying, that's it, 40 years, it's all done. 40 years of growth, it's all over. The China miracle has ended. And now we're going to go to this stagflation that Japan experienced in the early 90s. But I don't believe so. I would not underestimate China, but I also would not completely classify China just as an enemy that a lot of people in the West are now. It's an adversary, no question.
Hmm.
And there are things that are off the table in terms of cooperation around chipsets and military. It's also a competitor, fierce competitor. It's also a cooperation partner. It's also a friend, right? It's much more nuanced than the Cold War. And I think that kind of
So it's not so
um,
black and white, whereas it's clearly an enemy or clearly a friend. So there's a little bit of both in this relationship between China and U.S. I'm very
very much.
interested. I'm very interested to. You had mentioned that something that's very peculiar in terms of the existing relationship when it comes to AI between China and U.S. Could you elaborate on that, and especially how that parlays into Web3, for example?
Sure. So I think there's a great book called AI Superpowers that everybody should read
Hmm.
by Kai-Fu Lee. And he posits that the US is the leader in AI in the lab, and China is the leader in the wild. And I think the analogy I like to use is Jurassic Park. Get the amber, mosquito in the amber, blood in the mosquito,
Hmm.
DNA of the dinosaur in the blood. Let's extract that in the lab and mix it with modern day reptiles, amphibians, and make dinosaurs. And Jurassic Island is China. So it gets released into the wild and evolution starts to happen. Kai-Fu Lee says that China is the Saudi Arabia of data. It is sitting on a billion plus connections in mobile
Wow.
phones that are just, scattering data everywhere. And like
Hmm.
that's the fuel of AI. And the US really leapfrog ahead. This year is a seminal year with all the large language models with AI. And all that data is, has taken us, accelerated us into the future. But, there's all these other use cases of AI with facial recognition and, the, just driving and et cetera, right? And
Yeah.
China is able to continue to
Innovate
um,
and or
innovate because they just have so many data points.
exactly
And I think,
millions
go
of
ahead.
users, right? Or
That's right.
billions. Their
A billion,
population in the
yeah,
billions.
over 1.4 billion and a billion
Exactly.
online, right?
So that's like four times that of the US, right? Because the US is sitting around what 330 million in that neighborhood. So it's
That's right.
looking at about three times in terms of overall population. So would you say that when you use that analogy, how you describe, the U.S. is more in the lab, whereas the China is more in the wild? Would you
Mhm.
say that in terms of advancement, would you say that China is ahead of, let's say, U.S. in that particular area in terms of leading the growth and innovation when it comes to AI?
I think there are examples that in the wild that China is
Mm-hmm.
certainly far ahead of the US. Still lagging in the lab and probably will continue to do so. But their ability to really weaponize it in terms of not necessarily for um, negative purposes, but to be able to at least commercialize it is far ahead of any other market in the world. And I also have a podcast. I have a podcast with Animoca Brands. It's called Founder Insights, where I talk to Web3 builders. I love talking
Awesome.
about their journeys, like I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about mine with yours right now. But I also have another podcast, Rich Robinson Show, and it's called At the Speed of China. And I'm writing a book called At the Speed of China. And despite all the slowdown in China, China still is the fastest uh, evolving place in the world, and there's a lot to be learned from that.
See, that's
But
something that a lot of people don't know because they think that China's just so closed off, right? That
mm,
it's they're really lagging behind in terms of, let's say, ingenuity or creativity, for example.
well,
And
yeah, look at
what?
the top 8 startups in the world.
Hmm.
Of those, 3 are American,
Right.
4 are Chinese
Oh, so
in
that
terms of
that
and
already shows right there that they're up there.
one is Canva, right? And
Hmm.
there's information asymmetry there in that people don't really understand anything about China unless you can be in China and actually be inside the Great Firewall and use these apps and read Chinese. And you
Exactly, and
know,
be a part of their
like
culture.
yeah, one example that I give is and it's not about being a panda hugger, and it's not really about being a panda slugger. It's dancing with the panda and also like watching the panda and understanding what's going on because they certainly are watching the West and they
Hmm.
understand very well what's happening in the West. It's probably 100x more clarity than the other way around. And so, oldest society in the world, let's say, right, 5,000 plus years, largest country in the world,
Hmm.
1.4 billion people. They invented paper money, the Chinese, and about 7 years ago, even 8 years ago, paper money all but disappeared in China. Like
Wow, so it's all
you
digital
you
currency
you
then.
would think like, okay, it's going to be something like Singapore, or there's going to be a smaller nation like Korea that has 50 million people. Like they will come up with digital currency, but nope. China
China was the one who
became
did it.
with 1.4 billion people. And I mean, I used to do innovation tours, people coming to China. I said 3 groups of people use cash: really little kids, really old people, and you. the tourist because nobody else would use cash. And it's something
If
like
you're native
6x.
living there, you would be using digital currency.
Everything is Weixin Zhifu, Zhifu Bao. So WeChat Pay
Hmm.
and Alipay. And it's become fabric of society. And so two things. I want to sew this together now. One is about AI and Web3, and one is about wallet and Web3, because Web3 is the internet of ownership. Web3 is the tokenized version of the internet. What
Correct.
a pain in the ass it is to have a wallet. What a gigantic pain in the ass. Oh my God.
I think anyone would make that same argument. Nobody, like, let's say the regular user, they're not going to follow 15, 20 steps to set it up.
It's insane. People,
Mm-hmm.
I was asked to be an advisor to Animoca, 2.5 years ago, because I'd been through Web 1 and Web 2 and smartphone in China. I've been through these hype cycles. But also Web 1 was like, right? Getting a modem to get connected and TCP IP handshake and browser plugins. And,
We
you
remember
get this
the AOL dial-ups. We remember those days.
shitty, slow experience. That was nothing compared to the pain in the ass that Web3 is. Like Web3 is an absolute ridiculous pain in the ass. And it's almost like it exists in spite of itself. And all of that is going to get worked through. It will.
Oh, yeah, it always has.
Web2 is so elegant in so many ways. And yet now we haven't gone 2 steps backwards to Web 1. We've gone to something that's even more difficult. So the whole wallet setup is really, really clunky and shitty. And of course, in China, your wallet is connected to your bank and it's connected to and it's not decentralized. But still, I got a big taste of what it's like to have a wallet integrated into every aspect of your life. And it is absolutely delightful and magnificent. And now I moved to Indonesia. I'm in Bali 4 years since we became pandemic refugees, my family, during Chinese New Year 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And they're starting to do this thing called QR, identification system. But it's not ubiquitous. And for the most of the time I've been here, you do bank transfers, you do cash, you do credit card, you do whatever. It's kind of like most other places in the world. But in China, it is so unbelievably
So everything is seamless then. Everything
seamless and
it's
frictionless.
integrated.
You want to split a bill, you want to be able to like send money to somebody, you want to be able to order something inside of an app, like you want to do things inside with a game, or you want to right inside the messenger, you want to order food, and it's all completely
Frictionless.
Frictionless. You don't have to think about it at all. And
that's such a key, especially when it comes to Web3, as you mentioned. It's there's so many friction points that it makes it really difficult for the regular user to really come on board and use it on a regular basis.
It's ridiculous. It's like there's all these, in e-commerce, you track when people abandon their carts, and you can see all of these like pain points but like how many people have like abandoned. I've claimed bankruptcy in helping people get MetaMask because I've like held people's hand and like taken them through a ridiculously,
It's a very tedious process though.
Tedious process. Yeah. And then at the end, my buddy's like, "Oh, congratulations. Now I can get rugged." Oh, great. Right. Thanks.
Yeah. So they do all the work. And then all these other kind of risks and exposures kind of come into the picture, as you mentioned.
So it's
exploitations.
It's broken in so many ways, but despite all that, I believe
that it will get fixed.
I totally
and that's why we're on the podcast right here. We're talking about it, and we know.
So when I say it's shitty and broken, it's like my wife talking about how I'm shitty and broken, but she loves me, and she's right. Though,
Lovely analogy.
And it's okay, right? She loves me. She doesn't like me very often, and I get that, right? And I love you, Web3. I don't like you very much, right? Same thing I felt about Beijing. Well, I need Beijing. Well, Changchang bu xihuan ni. Like the traffic and the weather and the pollution and the low trust society and the prices, and you're just like, I love you. I love the dynamism. I love the growth. I love the culture and the history and the people and the food and everything. But like, man, that's not an easy place to be, right? And I spent 2 decades there, and I was there front row seat at the show for all that dynamism. But I want to live in the island of the gods, and that's what COVID has unlocked. So number one is I believe that we're going to have this integrated wallet that ultimately, when's that going to happen? 2025? By 2030, no question, there'll be this.
Yeah, that's a long time for innovation to really refine itself.
There'll be this whole, integrate. Like it took a few years for WeChat to be able to integrate that. And they already had the banks and everything else there, right? So that's coming. And then AI is also going to be an incredible, counterweight, and blockchain is going to be an incredible counterweight and also impetus for, for each other. Because with AI, like, how are you going to deal with AI when it's already so mind-blowingly good, but when you're talking about deep fakes and other stuff, how do you prove the provenance of something? And blockchain is perfect for that, right?
Exactly.
And then how do you build out this metaverse? I don't know. Let's say we live in a simulation. Let's say, Schrodinger's cat. Like, is the cat in the box? The cat is both in the box and out of the box, right? Like, you only when you observe it can you actually really tell. Like, maybe we do live in a simulation. Maybe things were light years away because
there's a lot of theory around that.
Simulation was set up, and we can only observe, once we actually look at it, right? So in the future, and I'm talking about longer in the future, like, do you need to have the metaverse, quote unquote metaverse, this immersive idea of the metaverse set up ahead of time? No, you can have AI kind of like paint it in real time, right? And I think that that's the most extreme version, but AI, of course, is going to help, startups. And if you're a builder, or if you're a student, or if you're anybody and you're not paying the $20 for ChatGPT a month or for whatever, and like really, really, really going through that learning curve and becoming expert at
AI
engineering those prompts, then you're a dope. You're just like, you can't moan or complain about anything. You need to be able to like leverage that shit for fun.
100% agree, because AI is really what's going to allow Web3 and blockchain to really maximize its potential. Very similar to how mobile phones allowed the internet to really become maximized as well.
Good metaphor. You're right. It really, floated out to the masses and just distributed it to, all these other points. So I think, yeah, like, buckle up. Like, I know we're in a bear. I know that there's lots of shit wrong with planet Earth and our respective countries, wherever anybody is, but
there's still a lot of good.
This is the year that AI like really breaks through, and this is the year that Apple Vision comes out, and I think like that's like a 5-year thing, but by 2030, that's going to be like what?
So do you think that by 2030, the metaverse will be up and running and will be more? Online lives will be
I don't
there?
know,
like,
and to be honest,
what are your thoughts on that?
Like, to be honest, I don't know, and I don't care about that. Like, I like it'll happen when it happens,
right?
And there's nothing to be done. There's a great book by Matthew Ball, Metaverse, and he talks about in detail. And I've read it twice, and it's like so fascinating. Even though, I've been a startup guy for almost 30 years, but I don't have a comp sci background or a technical background. I've just done it through osmosis. But he goes deep into like, here's a whole chapter on latency. Here's a whole chapter on the processing power. And he talks about like here's the laws of physics that are not going to be broken, and like there's just constraints on what we think of as this immersive Ready Player One metaverse. This is how I think of the metaverse. Number one, it's decentralized. Number two, it's tokenized. Number three, it's fucking fun.
Yeah,
and it's like, like fucking fun. Like, and like, that's how you have to live your life. By the way, I'm 56. I hope I never retire. I'm deep into Animoca. And for me, it's either no thank you or full body fuck yeah. Like, that's how you have to live your life, right? And it has to be like, I'm going to put my time
into
all
in, right?
I'm like, let's fucking go. LFG for sure. And I think that's what we're kind of missing right now. But it's coming because there's a lot of shit that's fucking fun in Web 2. And we just need to tokenize and decentralize that and then let all kinds of stuff happen.
Develop from there.
Yeah. I mean, like, the whole old saws of the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. Like, you could do some sort of immersive experience right now, but I don't, I've done VR, XR, AR stuff and it's like, why you can do it now. You could live in this kind of simulation in a way, but it's like, and it's actually pretty amazing, once you're actually in it, but you don't want to stay in it. Right. And I just don't like, I mean, the fact is people are like, let's go into this whole immersive experience. And it's like, people are like, I don't even want to be in this amazing immersive experience that I'm in right now. I want to go play a game that's really fun. Right. And like, so it's like, just because something can be immersive, does it really make it fun, right? Life is like
Right.
as immersive as we're ever going to be. And it's like not fun the vast majority of the time,
Yeah,
right?
there's
So
different
it's
types
like,
of being
yeah,
immersive, as you just mentioned. So not
yeah,
every time you're immersive, you're having a good time.
yeah, indeed, right? So I think people talk about, I don't know, I remember way back in the day, 97, with like, I was doing internet advertising and people talked about personalized ads and it's going to be this nirvana. And it took like 15 years for that to happen.
Hmm.
And it might be a nirvana for the advertiser, but not necessarily for the advertisee. And, there's, so it's like, is this incredibly fully immersive environment? Is it really going to be all that amazing? And need it be? I think there's so many other steps along the way. I still use SMS for, SMS is like has utility for me to do two-factor authentication or to do other stuff, right? So it's like it's not about like we're going to go fully immersive. It's going to be this broad
Like a
spectrum,
fully
just like
paradigm shift where you just
yeah,
forget about everything that you've done in the past and then just take on the
yeah.
new stuff that's
I
coming
mean
around
it's
the corner.
always like we're still using email, we're still using you know it's just like this whole China thing that I talked about is like life's nuanced, but people are like, I'm team red, I'm team blue, screw you, and team red, screw you, team blue, right? It's like people just want to be tribal and just kind of go,
And there's some
and it's just
polarization.
life is not like that.
Hmm.
Um,
It's like a mixed
so
bag of all the good stuff too.
indeed,
Yep. I love
indeed,
that.
yeah.
I love
So
that analogy.
I fell in love with China, and then I traveled around. I did other overland trip. I rode a 1942 Harley through the Mekong Delta in Vietnam, and I met a guy riding a bicycle, Phe Gle, like the flying pigeon from China to Cambodia, and that planted a seed in
Wow.
my head. So then I got my MBA in Europe, and I fell in love with the internet. It was August of '94. My buddy brought in a diskette, one of those 1.4 meg diskettes with a skull and crossbones on it, and he
Hmm.
loaded Mosaic. And that, Mark Andreessen Horowitz, A16Z, he went to University of Champaign, Urbana in Illinois, and he created the first web browser. And that was a predecessor of
Netscape, right?
Netscape. And
Yep.
but it was his college project,
Hmm.
Mosaic. And I had this crazy epiphany. So I think people talk about following your passion, or you know, I think I knew I wanted roughly to be an entrepreneur, but it wasn't until I traveled that I was like, oh, I lived in Prague during the revolution and right after the revolution. And I was like, ooh, this place is a little chaotic. This place is underdeveloped. It has
Hmm.
so much opportunity. Inner cookie monster say me want. And then I went to China and I was like, oh, this place is has the most uh, optionality and opportunity to grow. Like that's okay, China. And then you know, I'd been on the internet before, like CompuServe and
Hmm.
news groups, and but then I went on the first time I saw the World Wide Web, I was just like, wow, like is this coming from the disk? Like what was, and he was like, no, it's coming from a server in South Africa. And I was like, what?
Totally blown away
Like
from that.
blown away, right? I mean, it's just, I was 27 years old at the time, and to see something fully graphical and immersive, and it was this crappy, blinky, circa 1984, website, but it was extraordinary. I was working in the library at grad school, and I was like, whoa, whoa, hey, you, yes, all of you, come here, look at this. And I was
Well,
like, this is coming from a
this the fact
server
that
in
you could
South Africa.
that you could access information that is not local. That was mind blowing at
Mm.
the time because
But
we were
then,
so used.
and you could do that, but it was just like a blob of text. It was like it
Hmm.
was the difference between, I remember using DOS
I
and then
remember those
using a
days.
Mac, and then using Mac for the first time, and you're like, what, with
I don't.
18 A's? Like you're like, that's crazy town. Like
Hmm.
it's not even 10x better. It's like 10,000x better.
Yeah,
And
versus typing commands and
that
double
was the first
clicking.
time. So it was so easy for me to be like peanut butter and chocolate and China and internet. Let's do that. I
That is
just knew it.
beautiful.
So I was like, all right, I'm doing that, and I ended up um, focusing on that during grad school. And one of my buddies was living in Hong Kong from my ski bum days, and he, I was going to go crash with him, and 80% of success is just showing up. So I was like, I'm just going to go and darken your doorways and towels for a few months after grad school. So no money, no job, up to my neck in student loans, one-way ticket to Africa. So I wanted to do this other overland trip, those 4 overland trips, North, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia. I was like, I need to do Africa. It's got to be the toughest trip. And I want to do it in the most fucked up, tough way. So I rode a bicycle from Nairobi to Cape Town.
Wow, that
So
is
I
so
wanted to do
insane.
something. I always had this
Totally
like,
different.
I was never a military guy, but I've always been like fascinated by like special forces only because I'm like, what's their capacity for suffering? Like that's what defines the people that I've met who are in like special forces. Not like the buffest or even the smartest. It's a person that can just like sit in their suffering and just have
It's their
grit and like
limits.
make it like that's my limit. No, my limit's over there. All right, I don't have a
Hmm.
fucking limit, you know?
Hmm.
And so that's what I kind of wanted to do with this trip. Like it seemed kind of insane just by myself, bicycle, you know, it's the distance from LA to Boston, 5,000 kilometers. And it was like being an entrepreneur. Like this is going to be epic. All this planning, and then you like, yoo-hoo, you launch it, and then a few days in, you're like looking at yourself in the mirror in the morning. You're like, whose idea was this anyway? What a shitty idea. But
I
like,
got another
I've like,
close to 5,000 clicks to make it there.
right, right, yes, and you're like, oh man, but I've already decided, and
You got to commit.
I'm doing it, right? And like
Hmm.
that's the thing about like entrepreneurship or about anything in life. It's like I've already decided. Like the decision is made, and of course it's going to suck. Of course, the most likely outcome is failure. Of course, it's going to be miserable along the way. But I've already decided, and like that's part of the game, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I completed it, and it was it was a great. I often tell people because I'm a professor at Peking University at Guanghua MBA, a clinical professor of entrepreneurship. And people are like, how do I become an entrepreneur? I'm like, just go and start something. It's like there's never been an easier, cheaper time in history to be able to do that, right? When back in my day, like you needed to like buy Sun servers and get them shipped, after 3 months and set those up. And now you can be like AWS instance, right? And like, software is almost free, and like
Hmm.
your laptop is almost free, and you can get all this collaboration software, and you can basically get all these SaaS tools to launch, and you have AI to support you. It's like
Yeah, the
there's like
amount of
almost
resources that you have access to is
yeah, it's
totally
almost like
different.
somebody's like pre-chewing your food for you. All you got to do is
Just
basically like
swallow
that
it.
like that's one way of doing it. And but some people aren't ready yet. The other one is I think you go to a company that has ideally product market fit,
Hmm.
and you become like the bitch to the owners. Like you're just like, I will work my full job, and then I want to do another job and then another half job on top of that, just eating every frog. Every problem that you have, you want to
Just
prep for this
soaking
board
in all the
meeting.
information.
Yeah, but I need to shadow you. I want to be in the board meeting. I'm going to help
Hmm.
you prepare the deck. I'm going to help you manage like all like whatever you're stuck. I'm going to just, yeah, I
I'll
got
be
it.
there.
I got it. I'm going to do that. Right. And then you just put everything you got into that and become an indispensable part of that
Hmm.
founding team's life. And like that's another way where you're just like seeing all of and then you just do people, product, process. You help to put people in there. You put some sort of, process in place, SOPs or something, and then you find a software product and you just like, you know, smooth out all those burrs and edges. But I think a third way is to go travel in a way where it's like not Club Med or not even like youth hostels around Europe. It's like do something where you're like really, really like totally off balance, totally uncomfortable, really
Kind of
feeling like
stretch
you
your
want to you
boundaries.
you like you want to quit, and then like you move the line out. This is my limit. This is my limit. And
Yeah,
then you
keep on
become
pushing.
really, really, really good because that's the number one, Paul Graham from Y Combinator, he was interviewed, and uh, his top 10 qualities of an entrepreneur. It's like, what if you could summarize those top 10? And he's like, it's like, how long it took me to just list the top 10. Now you want me to condense it into one. And then later, he's like, okay, you know what it is? Relentlessly resourceful. That's what it is. That's what
Hmm.
an entrepreneur's like ultimate. You have to be relentlessly resourceful. You're going to be a mistake machine, and you're going to have all these problems, and you're just going to have to eat them up and just next,
Find
next,
your way.
next,
Yeah,
next.
exactly.
Find your way, because it doesn't matter how smart you are, how great your idea is, or how amazing your team is, or whatever. It's just
You're going to run into struggles and challenges no matter
every
what.
time, every time, no
Hmm.
matter what. And even if it's going great, you're gonna be, if it's going horrible, it's like it's
It's
like
always there.
that's the nature of it. And
Yeah.
the better you are at just
Dealing
okay,
with it.
yes, like say yes, I'm great, like I get to do this, and like okay, good. Like there's a thing with Jocko Willink, he's a special forces guy, and just like, oh, you don't have enough resources, good. Like now it's going to be excellent way for you to
See how
manage
resourceful
this
you
with
are.
fewer resources, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
The something externally happened, macro change, like good. Now you get to experience that, right? And I think that's probably the number one reasons why I tell young people to become an entrepreneur. It's not about being rich, because statistically it shows that you do way better on average joining a company,
Hmm.
especially a company that has like product market fit and is going from like build to grow. Um, that's creating way more millionaires and way more wealthy people. If you really want to become extremely wealthy, then entrepreneurship is definitely the way to go. But the odds of it are just not in your favor at all. But it's really important, I think, for entrepreneurship to occur, just for the economy and for society. But it's really great for yourself as a person. If you have the right mindset and the right focus, it's a way for you to just compress 7, 10, 12 years into very low single digit years, because you just
Hmm.
become a really covered in scabs and calluses and scar tissue,
Yep.
and you're like, I can. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead, Rich.
No, you can only control your output, not the outcome. So I'm just going to focus on the output, and then along the way you just become, you don't have to wish it's easier, just you wish you're better. And how do I
Hmm.
become better, and how do I just um, move forward?
Perfect. Yeah, I love that analogy. In sports, I know they always call it stacking days. So that's just consistently going to
Yes,
work because you cannot, as you mentioned, control the outcome of all your actions. But what you can do is control your output. So
indeed.
usually, when you look at it, like for example, athletes are a good example of that. They could work every day, but that doesn't guarantee them a championship at the end of the year. But what that does is it pushes them closer to earning that
But I kind of
championship.
guarantee you, if you don't do that every day, you're probably not going to get a
Oh yeah,
championship,
you
right?
probably
So
won't
it's
be
like,
playing for
yeah,
playoffs.
yeah. Yeah, and I think you look at Jerry Seinfeld, and he talks about having this consistency, like don't break the chain of like writing jokes every day, or doing whatever, and just
Hmm.
being really consistent. And I think that's one thing that I just got back from Tony Robbins in Sydney last week. It was his last live event, and he really talks about mindset. And I think mindset is the most important battle. Like you have this battle out there as an entrepreneur. It's kind of
But
like this situation
internal is a
room.
lot of it.
I would say I would go so far as even most of it, right? People
Hmm.
think of this like situation room in World War II with like, oh, there's planes on a string, and there's like the terrain and the all the resources from the enemy side and your side, and the weather, and all of these other factors. And like that's sort of the game that you're playing when you're building your company. But it's really between your ear holes, that kind of
Yeah,
that battle in a way, and being able to
it's a lot
have
of mental and psychological.
quality of your emotions, and to be able to like every time something happens, just like good, just
Hmm.
good, fascinating,
It's all a
good.
matter
All
of
right, next,
perspective.
next. Right? It is right. A nightmare and adventure. That's what I learned traveling. Is the same exact thing. It's a freaking nightmare. Oh, what an adventure! It's the
I
same
love
thing,
that.
and like that's
It's all
what
the way that
you
you see it.
yeah, you like you need to convince yourself, and you can convince yourself either way, and then you convince yourself that it's a nightmare, and you're bummed out, and the team feels that, and internal strife happens, founder conflict, like that,
Hmm.
all or you don't face up to reality, and you don't know where your zero cash day is, and you don't really focus on the end user. You're just trying to self-aggrandize yourself, or do shit that feels like it's busy, but it's not, and you're unable to face that reality, because it's easy to just flee, to go to another conference, or to you know
But not deal directly with the
book,
issue at hand.
not deal directly with the issue.
Hmm.
It's right in front of you, that's going to move you forward. And I think most companies die because of suicide rather than murder. And that's
Wow.
like you can actually control that stuff internally, and
Hmm.
that's the stuff that kills you. So it's actually that's the really sort of empowering and great part there. So I fell in love with China, and I knew like that was the way to go. So after this bike trip through Africa, I went to Hong Kong and I spent 4 years there, 20 in Beijing, most of my adult life. And I did 8 startups during that time, 3 as an exec in private companies that went public. And I just love the art of the start. Like I can't get enough of that ultimate sport of entrepreneurship. All of my friend circle, social circle, everything that I do, probably 50 startups. I've been in the situation room as a angel board member, hundreds of others as a mentor, and I teach. I'm going back in December to teach my 9th year entrepreneurship in China. And I just live and breathe it and I love it. And Yat, who's the founder of Animoca, chairman, he, if you're not familiar with, Yat out there, I know you are, but he has a new TED talk about Web3, which is really fascinating. And he's Mr. Metaverse, and he's the Keanu Reeves of Web3. Nobody doesn't love the guy. And he's like, he's like a poet, tech philosopher king. And I think of him as the wizard of Web3. Like, if I'm going to get the fuck out of the Shire, leave the Hobbit hole while the kettle is whistling, and go to Mordor with these freaks and weirdos and dwarves and elves and hobbits, then I need a Gandalf like him
to lead the way,
to shine the way, right? And so that's what, he asked me to be an advisor. I'd known him since '97, and 2.5 years ago when the Ronin sidechain launched, it was a big spike. And I think that was, for my money, there's like CryptoKitties and there's punks and there's, NBA Top Shot. But I think, for better or worse, Axie Infinity was the real inflection point for Web3. That's like mass adoption. That's probably still the #1 owned NFT, millions of them. And, still the number of people that got wallets because of that still stands today. And I did the advisory stuff because I'd been through Web 1 and Web 2 and smartphone in China, these hype cycles,
right?
Where people are like, Web 1, like I remember my buddy was like, I can get books at the library. And there's like a bookstore there. Like, you want me to go online and click and somebody's going to like mail it? Like, it's the dumbest. What are you talking about?
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of pushback.
Facebook has no business model. Facebook has no, like for a half decade, Facebook has no business model. Facebook has no business model.
I remember those days.
The iPhone is a joke. The iPhone is
no one's going to spend $500 for a phone. I remember a lot of people were saying that.
It has no keyboard. I got my BlackBerry.
The plastic keyboards.
What are you talking about? Nokia's rules. Nokia was not just like a top brand. Nokia was the #1 brand across Asia Pacific for like the vast majority of countries.
I think it was worldwide. Like they had market share like up to 80% or more. Like they did.
Really, I don't think it was as strong in the US, but like in Asia Pacific, like if you looked like #1 brand affinity, it was like Nokia. It was like Apple. And then it just disappeared off the face of the earth, right?
And the same thing happened with BlackBerry too.
Yeah,
they
indeed,
just went,
right? Also,
yeah,
right?
In a matter of a short
Samsung is barely, Samsung's holding on, but like most other Android phones are all Chinese made. But yeah, and then China can't innovate. Nobody believes that. And #1 startup in the world, Beijing based, ByteDance, Jinzhi Toutiao, TikTok, Shein fast fashion, and Kuaishou, and China really does have an innovation engine. So, and then like, Web3, like monkey JPEGs, it's the dumbest thing. I right click, save what? And like, so it's like, I've seen all of this before where people are like, oh my God, like black cars for the 1%ers, like limos for the spoiled people in Silicon Valley. Uber's a dumb idea. And like Tesla, $130,000 sports cars, like that's a dumb idea. And you just have to you have to start somewhere.
Right.
And usually it's, in something that feels like a toy or feels weird. And that's why, I think, Board API Club, you look at that and you're like, that does not compute. But, we have this Mochaverse NFT collection, and it is just absolutely well thought out in terms of utility of forethought, all the ways that utility can be baked into that, and what can be done with the Mochaverse.
Could you
NFT
share some
collection.
of that in terms of the utility of those NFTs for Mochaverse?
Sure. So, like right now, it's still very much evolving because it has to be step by step. But there are all these, just like in a game with all of the different classifications and rarifications and powers, like the NFTs have that baked in there, play or build or do good. And all the partnerships that we have with, Yuga Labs, Bored Ape, with so many other NFT collections, and we're just going to be piling on more and more and more partnerships and utility on top of that. And I think go to mochaverse.xyz, you can imagine where that's going to evolve towards. And we have 450 companies in our portfolio, and that kind of like connective tissue between them and the rest of Web3, and you can imagine what it can turn into in the next bull. And
Oh yeah, that is right.
there's just a ton of, and it's not investment advice, but it just shows that like this is like, it takes a while for things to evolve. I mean, the iPhone launches in '07. League of Legends started to really crank in 2012 on a mobile game. It took a half decade for it to be like, this is what a kick-ass,
Mobile
just
game,
gigantic,
multiplayer.
gigantic adoption
Yeah.
a mobile game that's like amazingly elegant and beautiful and fun and evolving and just like defecates EBITDA. Like, oh, that's what it is, right?
Yeah,
It's
but
not
no one
some,
could see it, a couple of years back, right? And we're
you
kind of
couldn't,
sitting in that.
you literally can't. Yeah, it's kind of unseeable. And also, like, you think about Uber, it's like nobody was like, oh, smartphones are launching, so of course we're going to disrupt the taxi industry. Like, what? Like, but it was like location-based services and mapping services and payment services and a mass
Hmm.
adoption of apps and the gig economy and all those things come together. I remember the first time I just like was able to track an Uber coming to me and then just get out of the car and just be like, oh, see you later. Oh, wow, that was elegant and beautiful. In the
Hmm.
real world, that felt like logging in using OAuth into like using Google to just be like, click, I'm in, right? And just like, okay,
Very easy.
that's like just like I'm inner cookie monster say me want. Like I
Hmm.
just I want more and more and more of that. And I think we're not even scratching the surface yet. Matter of fact, it's the opposite, where it's like really is bah humbug, monkey JPEG, and what a pain in the ass, and what a
So that tells you like
untrue.
how early we are in terms of Web3 and its evolution. So
Mm.
would you say that we're really at the true infancy? Would this be equivalent to, let's say, the really mid 90s or even early 90s of the internet? Like how would you equate the two
I
in
think
terms
so.
of?
I think so. I think we've already the dot-com bust happened in '01.
Hmm.
So like it's almost like it was like let's say 95, 96, and then it took 5 6 years for the dot-com bust. Like it was almost like it was like a 2 year cycle for Web 2, so that
Hmm.
we like hype and then wow and peaks and then shark fin and then just back down. um and there were some macroeconomic wins now, as there were in back in you know April of 2000. But yeah, I think it's kind of that equivalent, but compressed. The cycles are even
Yeah, the
more
shorter
intense.
now.
Just because back then, you know, there was zero people on the internet in China in the '90s when I first got there in like 90, 95, 96, and there were tens of millions of people online, right? And now, yeah, with Web3, there's not a significant amount of people with wallets who are really active there, but there's billions and billions and billions of people who can easily smoothly move over once we
Hmm.
actually remove all that friction. And I often talk about, like, I love this thing called coconut kefir. You get a coconut and you put this culture inside of it, and the culture just eats up all the shitty sugar and it turns it into this kind of probiotic goodness that's great for your gut health. And I think that that's the phase
This
we're
is
in
what's
right now.
happening.
People are
Is
like diving in and all these burrs and edges and problems, and people are doing infra right now and like, let's make the whole, I hear over and over again, Web3 is invisible. Web3, let's make Web3 invisible. And like Web2 is invisible. Nobody says Web2 anymore, and nobody's going to say
hmm.
Web3 in the future either. It's just going to be the internet.
Yeah,
There may be some other term about it, like tokenized version, or I don't know, but blockchain or whatever is going to be
but
taken
there
there.
won't
But
be
it's going
this
to be,
clear segregation where a lot of it will be
yes,
intertwined with each other, and that would be like a lot more homogenous.
indeed, indeed. Just like with Web 2 and Web 1, it's like
Hmm.
there's like it's a spectrum as well too, right? So I think
Exactly.
that's the kind of theme of this podcast in a way, is that everything's a spectrum. Everything kind of is much more nuanced.
I love
So
that.
um, yeah, and I you know I really think that what's going to happen in the next bull, like whenever that's going to be. Like, who knows? Like, I don't want to brag about my mathematical skills, but like 09, 13, 17, 21, 25. Like
So you think the next one
maybe
is 2025?
who knows? Who
Yeah.
knows, right? It's like the Olympics or something, right? Like, I have to believe, like, of course, this is not investment advice.
Hmm.
Follow me for some more, personal finance tips. Like, who knows, right? I'm being totally goofy and facetious about that, right? It's like we all want it to come. We all want it to, like,
Oh, absolutely.
this year's in the rearview mirror, and then next year is like, oh, it's starting to get good.
Yeah, it's starting to pick
Look at
up.
that. And then 2025, like, whoa, fasten your, like, like
Your seatbelt.
five,
Yeah,
five,
where your
six
cheeks are
G's, right?
just exactly.
Right. And like, I think like, cause I was just in Token 2049 in Singapore, and yeah, I mean, compared to last year, it was a little bit more, fewer people, but the people there are like
Really
all in,
dialed in.
all true believers, absolute, just, can I get a witness, right? Like, it was crazy. Like, we had an event for the Mochaverse that I emceed, and I was busy emceeing, so I was trying to help some people get in. But we had 180 people at the event, and we had 1,200 people on the waiting list. Like, it was
Wow.
like throbbing, and it's, if I was like, if this is the bear, then
Just
buckle up,
wonder how insane when
Bucky.
things start to pick up.
For
The bull market.
for the bull, right?
Hmm.
And that's a good thing. And also, one thing that kind of concerns me, which is internet and blockchain had a baby, Web3. Finance and blockchain had a baby, DeFi.
Hmm.
And finance and internet always had crossovers. You need venture capital funds, you need the access to capital markets. But that sort of Venn diagram is like this, right? I
Hmm.
mean, but with Web3, it's kind of almost like a full eclipse.
Yeah, the
So a lot of
overlap's really
people,
extensive.
yeah, a lot of people equate, FTX or, Three Arrows or Do Kwon and, Luna with like Web3, and like, kind of, but not really, not actually, not even kind of. It's like, those are completely different things.
Hmm.
Web3 is about internet builders. And the beautiful part is Web3 is the internet of ownership, broad digital asset ownership. The Web3 is the internet of tokenization. And yes, and that's the good news. The bad news is it's also like the internet of ownership and tokenization, that, like, how do you grow it without people kind of, peeing in the pool by,
Hmm.
like, just like, let's speculate and let's just, like, let's rev this thing up. And like, there kind of is no way. Like, we're gonna
How
have
do
to
you
go
grow it?
through that.
How do you grow it healthily, right? Like,
Yes.
that's what we're
How do you
looking to
do
figure
that?
out right now in a healthy manner.
Yeah. And that's a whole nother thing. That's like our next problem in a way.
Hmm.
Is like, okay, this works, but like, how do you get, from people like jumping in that Honda Civic and then racing it like a Ferrari or an F1, right? Right. And just like blow the engine out. Right.
Yeah.
So like, that's a challenging thing. How do you have those sinks and faucets inside a circular economy to make it all work with tokens? And it's like, we'll figure that out, just because I think Web3 is much more like the real world than Web2. Web2 is this weird, distorted version of the internet. And yet our fearless leader often talks about that. We have House of Zuckerberg and Lords of Microsoft and, the order of Activision Blizzard or whatever. And we live in this shareholder economy. That's the foundation of capitalism. And there's producers and there's consumers.
Hmm.
And Web2, it's like, hey, you know what? Shareholder economy. Yeah, we're going to be the shareholder still. And you can consume it. But you know what? Screw you. You're also the producer. And you know what you get? You get nothing. But we're gonna remain the shareholders and just funnel everything up to like a half dozen companies, like Meta and Alphabet and
The parent
Microsoft and others.
companies.
And like, okay, yeah, that's not so great, right? All our time, treasure, and data, you get nothing and like it, right? Maybe if you're an extreme, influencer, maybe that's starting to happen now with the stars with Facebook, but they're playing like defense and catch up now.
Hmm.
But in Web3, it's like, okay, you're a consumer of Web3, you're a producer, you're also a shareholder. So that's actually
It's like all in one. So there's really no
beautiful
separation.
triumvirate. And
Mhm.
it's amazing for, I think, financial literacy. The best thing of Axie Infinity is that there was this huge grassroots growth in the Philippines of people really, driving forward this scholarship phenomenon with Axie Infinity. They got NFTs from people that own them, and they were like, okay, we're gonna get a wallet, and we're gonna be part of this community, and we're gonna learn some skills, and we're gonna work remotely on our phones, and like we're gonna and it was not a sustainable, healthy circular economy, right? It was kind of Ponzonomics, but that's just like the early days of like, Amazon started with books, even though the logo is A with an arrow to Z, because he picked Amazon as the biggest river in the world, and he wanted to do everything A to Z, but he picked books because that was all the SKUs, right? So it's like, you need to start somewhere in kind of a weird, awkward way and then expand from there. And like, that's what we did with Play to Earn. And I think what's going to happen is it's going to be play and earn. There's going to be like tiers. There's going to be like elite esport players. There's going to be this quote unquote like middle class of players, of people who own NFT
levels.
assets. And then there's going to be people that kind of grind. Like that happened with World of Warcraft. People went out and gathered wood and got gold, gold farming. And like that happens in the real world. Like you go sit in a beautiful cafe. I was a waiter for many years, and like people are like spending their money and enjoying like all their time in the cafe, and the owner is making money, and I'm grinding away, running like hell as a waiter back and forth there, right? It's like we all exist together. The owner and the people paying and the people grinding. And it's like, why is that so difficult to understand? Like, that's actually the fabric of our society. And like, why can't it be like that in games? Like, I want to be able to like show up on Friday night after a week of work and just show up and like, oh, look at my game assets have been like kind of like groomed and taken care of. And now I can ride the hell out of this, virtual horse, because it's been sort of trotted around and fed and, groomed and like, given the proper shots and like, whatever kind of metaphor that is. And now I can be like, I'll definitely pay however, few bucks a day to be able to do that. And somebody's like, I will gladly give up my time to, I make $2 a day in my country, or $3 a day. And you're going to give me $1 an hour? Like, yeah, let's go. Right. And like,
especially for play a game, like,
sure.
That sounds like a good deal.
I think that's going to happen. And there's going to be all these other jobs in the metaverse. And I think, AI is also going to be this seismic societal shift that's going to crush a lot of jobs. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. Automation.
But I think Web3 and, broadly the metaverse will open up all these new job opportunities for the masses that I think will be a counterbalance there as well too.
Love that. Yeah, because that's what, a lot of people saw when the internet came about. Was, a lot of, especially like the traditional, let's say, music labels, for example, when people are downloading songs through, let's say, LimeWire or Kazaa, they're saying that, like, how are artists going to monetize this? And obviously, artists and musicians have not gone away since the internet has matured over the last pretty much 2.5 decades. In fact, it's actually adds another revenue for them or another venue for them to, engage and build a stronger relationship with their listeners. So that was something that was not foreseen at the time, whereas there was a lot of negative sentiment around, the internet based on, what people were doing, that they could just get free content, right? And, we just found other ways to monetize opportunities. And we'll probably we'll see that in Web3 and AI, and when the metaverse and everything matures as well, we'll see new opportunities that we're sitting here having this conversation, Rich, that that would just totally blow our mind.
Yes, I believe. Wow, Felix Cao, everybody, come on. Yeah.
Well, Rich Robinson,
nice
you're the star of this. You're the star of the show.
No, stop.
You're the star of the show.
I'm not making a stop sign. I'm actually like, yeah, come on. That's always, I love to do that on stage. Oh, stop. And I pull my hands towards me. Keep going.
No, I love it. This is your perspective on, Web3, your entire journey. Also the outlook, especially on the impact that AI will have. And also how the metaverse will come about too. I think, we're in really good hands. We're at the very, very early stages, but that's the most exciting part, because we're writing history as we come along. So with that,
indeed, we are.
Let's hop on another podcast episode in the future, and then we could assess how much things have changed, from our talk today to the next time we chat.
I
How's that sound?
believe. I
I believe
believe.
too.
All right.
I love it.
Awesome.
Well, Rich,
See you
thank you
later.
for being
Thanks
a guest
again.
on the show, and let's catch up sometime soon.